Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Aaron Conklin. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm hoping that this workshop is going to be beneficial for all of us that are participating in it. I will start off by saying that my idea for this workshop is to be one where the participants are involved in the unpacking of the story, so to speak. So I am a high school English teacher in the United States, and so I do have some slides that I would like to use to kind of orientate us and give you an outline of what to expect from the workshop. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
There you go. Yes, it's come.
All right, so the title of the workshop, Storytelling as a Conduit for Growing Through Grief. During this workshop, I'm probably going to kind of go back and forth between sharing the story so we can all experience it and what it brings out in us, and then also a little commentary on just like my experience teaching it. I work with high school adolescents. With this lesson, it's mostly 11th and 12th graders, which is about 17, 18 years of age. A little bit about me. My name is Aaron Conklin. I'm from Warrensburg, Missouri, United States. I live on a small 20-acre farm there. I love nature. It's a big part of why we moved out to the farm. I am a husband and father of two boys. I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. I've been a high school English teacher for about 8 years. I mostly teach 10th grade English, and then I teach an 11th and 12th grade Greek and Roman mythology class, which that class is really what sent me down to the path of being a storyteller and just really falling in love with myth and poetry and story. I'm also a wrestling coach. I help coach wrestling at the high school here and also at the middle school. And if you can tell, I am in my classroom tonight. That's this here behind me. Figured that would be a good place to kind of launch from. Internet's good and I have no distractions in the background. All right, so a little quick outline of what you can kind of expect tonight. I'm going to start with just kind of welcoming everyone and going over this orientation. A lot of things that I like to do with my students from doing this workshop is the first one is nourishing a worldly perspective. So trying to become aware of the globe, the rest of the world. We live in a very small town in Midwest USA. So some of my students, that's all they've really seen has been this small town. Also, it's important to create a collective circle of safety. I'll kind of share my tips on how I try to ensure that everybody is going to be here for the experience and nobody's allowed to, be hurtful towards anyone else. We'll talk about grief work and how that comes up in the story and in the story circle. And then I like to share poems and then check-ins. And then we will experience this version of the story of the cat who lived a million times. And then we'll engage with what's called feeding the story, where that's that participant activity portion where I'll want you guys to kind of talk about what you're feeling and experiencing through the story. And then we're going to end with the death mask creation. And then we'll kind of do some reflections and takeaways towards the end. Okay, so one of the things that I kind of get my students to start thinking about before we really get into it, and I know I'm probably talking to many people who are involved with storytelling and stuff, so I hope I'm not going over stuff many of you probably already understand, but stories can help us learn to live in the moment. And one of the things we first start to think of is stop thinking of time in the linear sense of like past, present, and future, and think of it more in a cyclical view. And with time, things are constantly changing and aging, and so transformation is occurring. And we can think of these three stages of transformation of cyclical time. And depending on which culture or philosophy you're looking at, there's many different names for these stages. If you think about the Brahman Trimurti, you have the three forms of Brahman. You have preservation, and destruction. And this cycle of time and transformation can apply to anything. It can apply to individuals. It can apply to partnerships. It can apply to families, cultures, communities, nations. Pretty much everything that's in existence can go through this type of transformation. If you're familiar with the work of Joseph Campbell, who built upon Carl Jung's work, at the individual basis, the hero's journey breaks these down. You have separation, which is distancing yourself from what is familiar. And then you have the initiation, the road of trials begins, and the change starts to occur, and the hero starts to discover the qualities that makes them a hero. And then you have the return, where they're able to take what they've learned on their journey and bring it back home and raise the quality of life for everyone. If you think about samsara, the cyclic existence of life, death, and reincarnation, you have life, you have death, and then you have rebirth. And then the ancient Greeks also had words for this too. The destruction or death type phase was called apocalyptus. And apocalyptus sounds very much like apocalypse, but it's not the end. It's simply the end of the old order breaking down. And then they would have what they called kairos. And a literal translation of kairos means opportune time. And kairos is kind of like the threshold in between apocalyptus and apocastasis, which is the new order coming to pass. So kairos is really this time that I try to emphasize with my students that we can try to participate in and elongate when we listen to story. I think one of the most recent real world examples of this is COVID-19. The way we thought of the world before COVID-19 is completely changed. It's come along, and that old sense of the world is gone now. It's not going to ever be like it was before. And then for a while there, we were in a moment where we didn't know what to do. We didn't know where the next steps were, what the new direction was, and we were stuck in that kairos stage. And I think we're actually just I'm not an expert, but I think we're just now starting to come out of that and starting to see what the new life is going to be like. But the point is that kairos happens a lot. We live in moments of uncertainty where we don't know what the next steps are, and learning how to be comfortable in that allows the new ideas and creation to come up from inside of us. So we can practice that with being held by a story. There's a quote from Dr. Carl Jung that I like that I think kind of really drives this point home. Every transformation demands as its precondition the ending of a world, the collapse of an old philosophy of life. So when we engage with stories, our imaginations get to play in cyclical time. In the collective setting, we all get to share this experience, and the story, the energies that it invokes, we can feel it transforming before us, around us, and even through us as we experience it. The collective setting creates like what we call a container, and it becomes a place where each participant realizes that, okay, this is a place where we can talk about things at a deeper or higher level. It's not going to be the conversations that you would have with somebody you pass on the street or at the water cooler at work. We're going to be talking about things that maybe people aren't necessarily comfortable with or talking about. It's okay. This is the place where we're going to think like that, and we're going to feel that and experience it. And so this can be uncomfortable, especially when you're held in a moment in the story and you don't know where it's going to go next. It can generate feelings of uncertainty, unfamiliar emotional tones, but it can also have lots of really powerful feelings of like a sense of purpose or a direction. And then when we also share our collective experiences with each other, it offers us different ways of interpreting and experiencing the story. So in this whole process, that's where the transformation is supposed to occur. And our psyches kind of collectively expand this moment of kairos. And through that, that's where the new ideas that are supposed to vitalize us are going to hopefully come through. There we go. the quote from Mr. Campbell, because I'd like to start talking about building the trust. What I've just described about trusting people to be able to talk about these types of things, it's not something that is very easy to do with people that you don't know. Although I would argue that can also make it more easy for some people. But so establishing a sense that this is a safe place to discuss these types of things, and that there is actually an identity and a unity underneath everything, that if we trust that that's there and feel that and let that kind of hold us together, then we can support each other as we go through this type of experience. Okay, so like I said, my students were from a pretty small town, so I'm always like, I have to lead with this explanation of how stories teach us to love the world. Many stories come from cultures with values that are different than our own. And sometimes it's really, really hard to turn off our own biases towards other stories. And this is an opportunity to do that. This is an opportunity to turn off those judgments and just let yourself be taken by the story. And it's not easy to do, but it's something it's beneficial to try this. And I always tell students that diversity is healthy. Diversity, just like in biology, it's good for the gene pool, it's good for life, it's good for understanding things. It encourages awareness and global perspective. And then I also point out that, stories come from different cultures that lived in different geographic regions at different time periods, but many of these stories draw on the same conclusions about what's meaningful in life and what it means to be a human. And so what does that really say about what it means to be a human? In our modern world, it's really easy to get focused on the differences, but there's really underneath all of that something much stronger and much more abundant that unites us. So creating the collective space for safe participation. So these are just some of the expectations for the circle. It's supposed to be a safe place to creatively express thoughts and feelings. When I do this in the high school setting, I do always have to preface that, trust your mistrust. We are in an academic setting, so we have to follow school policy, but also, it's good not to lay all of your cards out on the table at once. You can slow play things, you can not reveal some things. And if you feel like maybe it's something that you shouldn't say, it's okay to listen to that voice and not share it. But each person is in charge of what they're going to generate from this experience, okay? So the significance of how you participate tonight, you're the highest authority of who you are and knowing who you are and what's going to work for you. And you get to define what that significance means tonight. Nobody else is going to be holding you to a standard, and I don't have rules for what you're expected to do. You're in charge of what you're going to get out of this. And so there's a freedom in that, because yes, I'm an English teacher, but that traditional English analysis of things doesn't necessarily apply here. You get to interpret, perceive, experience, connect with the story, however you make associations with it. You have that freedom. There's no wrong way of understanding it. There's simply how you understood it, and you get to share that with us. So we will be sharing our perspectives. That's the portion what we call feeding the story. And then also I have to say that violence is not allowed. No one's allowed to be psychologically, emotionally, verbally, physically hurtful or disrespectful to any member of the group. And I always ask for a visual consent from everyone. If you could please just raise your hand that you agree to this, or if you want to click the little raise hand thing on your Zoom camera, that would be great. Just showing that we're all trying to be together in a place that's not gonna be conducive of violence. All right, the grief work portion. I have to admit, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist or anything. However, I have had to do serious grief work from my own experience. And I am a member of a 12-step group, and that has given me a base for self-exploration and getting through things that needed to be processed through, that I couldn't keep carrying around with me. That we all have different ways of expressing grief and processing through grief. And I do believe that storytelling and experiencing a story can help with some of that. Because we know that life is not easy. The world's full of loss, suffering, there's sickness, there's change, there's war, there's violence, life's not fair. We see bad things happen to good people. We see innocent people have to undergo very harsh circumstances, and it doesn't seem fair. And just in the process of life, in the process of change, of growing up, with a lot of the students that I work with, they're going through grief because they're an adolescent, because they're no longer a child anymore, but they're not quite an adult, and they don't know what's wrong with them. They don't know where they fit. They don't know where they belong. And I actually have had several students bring up like suicide, thoughts of suicide, because they're feeling this transformation happening in them. They know that something has to be let go of so that they can keep growing into who they are. But I think a lot of times maybe they get confused and think that all of them needs to die, when only you got to figure out what part of you needs to die so we can leave that behind and keep moving forward. So stories provide scenarios where we can experience grief. Something bad happens to a character. They are threatened with death, or they lose their entire family. And as we experience the story through the character, we also get to take on that identity, and we get to ask ourselves, well, what would I do if that happened to me? What would I do if I lost my family? And that can be a powerful way of preparing our minds and preparing our psyches and our hearts for if something that devastating should occur in our lives. So and I also, the ancient Greeks had a word, catharsis. I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with. I always wondered why the sad songs always made me happy. And like, I always thought there was something wrong with me. I was like, why am I backwards like that? But when we experience a story and we connect our grief with what's happening in the story, it can be kind of a spiritual cleansing. It allows us to process through our own grief as we experience it in the story. Okay, so I am getting close to ready to start doing the official story. And I always like to open with poems. I think poetry is fundamentally connected with story and myth. Poetry uses imagery and metaphor, and it's really a great way to just kind of start jump-starting our mind to go into this kind of higher consciousness, playing with imagery, playing with metaphor, playing with symbols. And all poetry, or all good poetry, deals with three big themes: life, love, and death. So it's always relevant. I also have a pretty general definition of poetry as an English teacher. Anytime you're trying to communicate something to someone else and you want them to understand it in the way that you experienced it, to me, that's poetry. So I would like to start with a couple poems, and then we would move into check-ins, and then we can start with the story. Does that sound okay, Eric?
Yes.
All right. So the first poem I'd like to share with you is by a German poet, Rainer Maria Rilke. And this poem is called Sonnets to Orpheus number 4. Oh, you lovers that are so gentle, step occasionally into the breath of the sufferers not meant for you. Let it be parted by your cheeks. It will tremble, joined again behind you. You have been chosen. You are sound and whole. You are like the very first beat of the heart. You are the bow that shoots the arrows, and also their target. In tears, your smile would glow forever. Do not be afraid to suffer. Give the heaviness back to the weight of the earth. Mountains are heavy. Seas are heavy. Even those trees you planted as children became too heavy long ago. You couldn't carry them now, but you can carry the winds and the open spaces. The other poem that I would like to kick things off with is from a book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And this poem is entitled On Pain. And a woman spoke, saying, "Tell us of pain." And he said, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burn your lips, has been fashioned of the clay which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears. Okay, so this is the point where we kind of do check-ins. And this is an important part because this signifies a moment of entering this container. It represents a crossing of the psychological threshold here. So because we're a pretty large group, we won't, have time for everybody to go around and verbally say this. So what I would like is if everybody could just drop their name, 2 to 3 sentences about what you want us to know about you and where you're at as you come into the circle. It's important if you don't actually want to like type it up, at least go through this process in your mind because it's for the group, but it's also for you to kind of I'm a student of martial arts, and when you enter the dojo, before you step on the mat, you always bow because that moment says, I am now ready for whatever's going to happen. And that's kind of what we're initiating here. It also helps to end your check-in with, I'm in.
Aaron,
Yes.
can I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, it's absolutely thrilling to learn about how you work with high school students. The level of emotional intelligence and emotional development and maturity must be tremendously increased by this kind of work. How do they take you in Missouri? Do they love and appreciate you the way they should, or are they just shocked, or what happens?
It usually, and I what I'll do is we sit in a circle in the classroom, and I pass a talking stick around. So it's an object that signifies who the speaker is, and it kind of puts them on the spot. And a lot of them will just say, something, whatever they can, just to kind of get their turn to pass. And then some of them will share a little bit more. And then we'll do this again, like in halfway through the story, like we're going to do tonight. We're going to stop and feed the story, and then we'll feed it again once it's complete. And then we also do a checkout at the end. So by that time, I've passed the stick 4 times, and I've kind of put them on the spot. And a lot of them start to open up more once other people start to open. But there's still many that are resistant to it, and that's okay. Like as a teacher, you never know the full ramifications of something that you do, and sometimes talking about a lot of this stuff, the changes in life, the maturational changes in your psyche, some of that won't really apply to them until like 10 years down the road. So Uh, but I do get ones that come back and they talk about it because, we turn the lights off in the room and I have a little indoor fireplace that I put up in the middle, and it really creates an atmosphere for storytelling that they enjoy.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I've taught at many colleges in the USA and India, but I've always wanted to teach high school English. Never have, not yet. So it's wonderful to experience it through you.
Cool. Thank you. All right. I see people are checking in, and great. It's wonderful. It's so wonderful to have you all here. Okay, so like I said, usually after I give everybody a chance to kind of check in and they're here and that, you've personally checked in with where you're at, where you're feeling right now, and knowing that we're getting ready to proceed with this experience. That's the important part. So now I would like to move into the story tonight.
Before you do, Casey Conklin, is your hand up? Or Aaron Conklin, you are Aaron. Is there a Casey Conklin here also?
Yes, that's the missus.
Oh,
That's
I
the
think she
woman who
just took
walks
her.
beside me.
She just took her hand down. Okay,
Yeah,
carry on.
she was. I think she raised her hand just to show that she was agreeing to the nonviolence.
Very good.
Okay, so the story that I'm going to tell tonight it's a children's story. It's entitled "The Cat Who Lived a Million Times," and I have to admit I don't tell the exact version from the book. I've kind of built upon it and expanded upon it to help make it suitable for the audience that I tell it to, and also to kind of tap into the emotions and things that we're trying to experience in the story. So this is not like Yoko Sano's version. But with that, I'd like to go ahead and begin. There once was a cat who lived a million lives, died a million deaths, and was reborn a million times. He was a beautiful cat with deep, rich markings that striped his body. And throughout his many lives, the tiger striped cat had various owners, all of whom loved him very much, and all of whom cried deeply when he passed. But the tiger striped cat, he didn't care for any of his owners very much. And the tiger striped cat had never cried. In one lifetime, the cat was owned by a powerful king. And this king loved to make war. He was always fighting wars in some distant land, conquering and seizing power. The few times the king was at home, he spent his days planning and prepping for the next war. The tiger striped cat didn't care for war, and he didn't care for the king's obsession with might and glory. Nevertheless, the tiger striped cat was the king's prized pet. And the king decided that he wanted to take the cat with him to the next war. So he had the royal blacksmith construct an ornate traveling cage for the cat. And so the tiger striped cat traveled with the king to the front lines of the battlefield. And the tiger striped cat witnessed the horrors and triumphs of war. One day, a stray arrow flew through the cage's bars and struck the tiger striped cat, killing him. The king stopped fighting immediately and ran to the cat and gently removed its limp body from the cage. And then, this great, powerful king held his beloved pet to his chest, and he began to weep right there on the battlefield. Great, powerful sobs poured from the king's heart, and the king lost his love for war that day. And upon returning to his own kingdom, the king had a small burial box constructed for the cat, and the tiger striped cat was buried under a tree in the royal garden. The king never went to war again. In another lifetime, the tiger striped cat belonged to a sailor. This sailor loved nothing more than to be out on the open sea with a strong wind in the sails and the sun shining brightly over the waters. The sailor brought the tiger striped cat with him on all of his voyages, and together they visited many far-off ports, strange lands, and faraway places. The tiger striped cat didn't care much for the sea. The salt in the air, the constant rocking back and forth of the ship, always being surrounded by water, was unappealing to him. The tiger-striped cat didn't care much for the sailor's adventurous spirit. Nevertheless, he was the sailor's beloved pet and sailing companion, and he went wherever the sailor did. One calm and unsuspecting day, it just so happened, as it sometimes does on the open seas, a rogue wind brought forth a powerful wave that slammed into the side of the sailor's ship. The tiger-striped cat, who had been sunning himself on the ship's rail, was blindsided as the entire ship was turned on its side. The sailor watched the ship's railing go under the water, and he saw the tiger-striped cat's paws desperately trying to cling to the rail. Then, like some great beast, the ship shook herself and returned upright again, and the tiger-striped cat was swept away by the rushing waters. The sailor, acting as fast as he could, retrieved a net and threw it overboard to save the cat. But he was too late. When he pulled the net back on board, the tiger-striped cat had already drowned. The sailor stood on the ship's deck and held the tiger-striped cat, whose body looked like a wet towel, and he cried for the loss of his shipmate and traveling partner. At the next port, the sailor went through the town and up to a hillside that overlooked the sea. There he found a small tree and he buried the tiger-striped cat. In another lifetime, the tiger-striped cat belonged to a circus magician. The cat spent his days knowing the spotlight, the stage life, and the crowds of cheering people. The cat learned to perform small acrobatic tricks and to assist the magician in several acts. For their most famous act, the grand finale, the magician would place the tiger-striped cat into a box and then cut it in half with a saw. The audience would cringe and fear the worst, but then, to their surprise, the magician would place the two halves of the box back together, reach inside, and the cat would jump into his arms whole. The crowd would cheer and applaud and throw money and fragrant flowers onto the stage. But the tiger-striped cat, he didn't care much for spotlight, fame, or the applause and cheers of the crowd. And he didn't care much for the magician or the magician's passion for performance. One day, during the grand finale, in front of one of the largest crowds on record, the magician made a mistake while cutting the box in half, and the saw slipped right through the tiger-striped cat, killing him instantly. The magician paused, stupefied by what he had just done, unable to completely grasp that he had just killed his assistant. But more than that, he had just killed his friend. And upon the stage, in the spotlight, in front of the crowd of people, the magician began to cry as he reached inside of the box and held the two halves of the tiger-striped cat. The crowd gasped at first. They thought it was part of the show, but when they saw the sincerity of the magician's grief, many of them began to cry too. Some screamed, others got up and left. The magician, knowing that it was his fault that the tiger-striped cat had died, remorsefully placed the cat's body into a small box and buried him under a tree out back of the circus tent. After that, the magician decided he would never perform the grand finale again. In another lifetime, the tiger-striped cat belonged to a jewel thief, and this jewel thief loved to steal diamonds. He would often scout out the houses he targeted for several weeks, noting details about the layout, location of the safes, and the occupants' schedules. Many of these houses owned a guard dog, so the jewel thief and the tiger-striped cat designed a plan that proved to be very successful in robbing these types of houses. The cat would hop the fence and strut just out of reach of the tethered dog, distracting it and getting it to bark loudly. And while the dog made all that noise, the thief would break into the house, crack the safe, and stash the jewels into a bag. After a certain amount of time, the cat knew to leave the scene and rendezvous with the jewel thief at their secret hideout. The tiger-striped cat and the jewel thief became very rich, but the jewel thief was a greedy man who always wanted to steal more. The tiger-striped cat, he didn't care much for wealth and luxury, but he knew the jewel thief needed him, so he played his part. One day, during one of their heists, an unforeseen turn of events occurred. The rope that tethered the guard dog broke under the strain of the animal pulling it. The dog immediately seized the tiger-striped cat in his jaws and shook him back and forth viciously. The tiger-striped cat was killed. The jewel thief, unaware, proceeded with the operation, stole the jewels, and slipped away to the hideout. But after waiting around for a long while for the tiger-striped cat to arrive, he began to worry. The jewel thief carefully crept back to the crime scene and peered over the fence. The dog had retreated to its den, and there, in the middle of the yard, lying like a tattered doll, was the body of the tiger-striped cat. The jewel thief's heart was broken, but he managed to retrieve the cat's body, and he carried it in his arms as he walked the back streets of the city towards the secret hideout. The thief's cries howled through the city's alleyways that night, much like a lost cat that's left out in the cold. And when the thief returned to the hideout, he buried the cat next to one of his prized stashes beneath a particular tree out back. In another lifetime, the tiger-striped cat belonged to an old woman. The woman lived alone, for her husband had died several years earlier. Her children were all grown, with children of their own, who were also coming into early adulthood. The old woman's family was very busy with their lives and rarely had time to visit her. Aside from preparing small meals for herself and the cat, the old woman spent most of her days just sitting in a rocking chair, looking through the large front window of her house. The tiger-striped cat would sit on her lap as she rocked and watch the world outside her window passing by. The old woman would stroke the cat's head and scratch under his chin while she rocked and told him stories from her past. It was an easy life, and the tiger-striped cat didn't have to do much but listen and keep the old woman's lap warm. But the tiger-striped cat, he didn't care much for the old woman or the stories she would tell of raising her children. And after a while, he grew tired of being petted all the time and bored with such a simple life. Nevertheless, he was the old woman's only living companion, and he stayed with her, and he grew old on the old woman's lap. One day, the old woman was in the middle of one of her stories, and she noticed that the cat had become really still beneath her hand. She looked down and realized the tiger-striped cat had passed on her lap. The old woman cried all day. She called her children and told them of the cat's passing, and the old woman's children came by and visited with her. They prepared the tiger-striped cat's body and laid it to rest in the backyard beneath a willow tree. After that, the old woman's children began to visit her more, and the old woman made a point to call them more often. In another lifetime, the tiger-striped cat belonged to a little girl, and this little girl loved the tiger-striped cat with all her heart. He was her favorite plaything. He attended all of her essential affairs, tea parties and clubhouses, jump rope and hopscotch. The little girl's favorite thing to do was read books under the tree in her backyard. And there were many days that the little girl would carry the tiger-striped cat with her tiny hands out to the tree, and she would read him stories in the shade. The tiger-striped cat, he didn't care much for the little girl, or tea parties, or for the activities and games the little girl liked to play. The stories the little girl would read were unappealing to the tiger-striped cat. After all, he had lived 1,000,000 lives. What were some simple children's stories compared to that? And the little girl, not meaning to, was rough with the cat, carrying him incorrectly, dressing him up, and sometimes, when something had upset her, she would cry and blow her nose right into the cat's soft fur. One day, the little girl's father took her to the pet store to buy a collar for the cat, and the little girl wanted to get something special for her friend. She chose a beautiful purple collar with sparkly rhinestones, and was so happy to come home and put it on the tiger-striped cat. Now, the cat didn't care for the new collar very much, and he thought it looked kind of dumb, and it was a little tight and uncomfortable. But nevertheless, it was a gift from his owner, and he wore it to make her happy. That afternoon, the little girl came to carry the cat out to the tree and read stories. And unbeknownst to the little girl, when she picked up the tiger-striped cat, his collar got hung up in her arms and cut off his breathing. and the poor little girl accidentally strangled the tiger-striped cat. And when she realized that her beloved tea party guest and gentle storytime friend was dead, the little girl began to cry uncontrollably. Her father came rushing out of the house and found her with the lifeless cat. And when he realized what had happened and saw that his little girl's heart was broken and he knew he couldn't save her from knowing this type of pain, he began to cry too. Together, the father and daughter dug a small grave beneath the reading tree, and they buried the tiger-striped cat. The little girl found a large and smooth ocean stone, and she painted it and placed it over the tiger-striped cat's grave. On the rock, she laid the purple collar. All right, so this is where we're going to stop with the story for right now. This is the time when I would say this would be a good time to break up into rooms and kind of share and talk and think about some of these questions and your experiences with the story so far. The images, also where you're feeling it in your body too. It's a type of energy working through us right now. So where might you be carrying the story in your body as well? And if you feel so inclined to write or about what you're experiencing, that would be good too. But so Eric, do you think two to a breakout room or?
Well, why don't you come back, come out of the screen share?
Okay. Let's see.
Okay, we have 32 people in the meeting, but only about half of us have our cameras on. Usually, I think it's good to just put people in breakout rooms who have their cameras on.
Okay.
So
well,
if you'd like, go ahead, Aaron. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, if I don't know if people are going to turn their cameras on because they want to say something, and if that's the case, then yeah, we should go to breakout rooms. But if it's only the people who have cameras on, I mean, we could stay here together and everybody could kind of hear what's being said. I think that's powerful too. I mean,
okay, well, it's up to you.
Yeah, let's give it a try. Let's try to stay in the room and if you feel so inclined to share about what you're experiencing, go ahead and unmute yourself and share.
Okay, I'm going to pause
Hey,
the.
welcome everyone. My name is Aaron Conklin.
I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so because I think it's good to let people share their thoughts without being recorded. So
thank you. Realize it and figure it out. But that's good. But then the next level is also, okay, why? Why are you thinking of that part of the story? Why is this part of the story, getting to you? Because that's where you really start to develop the self-knowledge that can come. So yeah, I just want to encourage that we're all doing that too. All right, so let's get to the conclusion of the story. Okay, so if you remember, our tiger-striped cat has lived a million different lives, and he's died a million times, and he's been reborn a million times. He's had various owners. We've had the king and the sailor and the magician and the jewel thief and the old woman and the little girl. And the tiger-striped cat, he's never cared for any of his owners very much, and he's never been afraid to die. And the tiger-striped cat has also never died. Well, it just so happened that in another lifetime, the tiger-striped cat was born a stray cat. And as a stray cat, the tiger-striped cat had no master and was free to do as he wanted. And so the tiger-striped cat proceeded to do just that. He ventured wherever he desired. He ate whenever he could find food, and he slept when he was tired, and he played when he felt the need. Many other stray cats lived close to him, and they all thought highly of the tiger-striped cat. The tiger-striped cat would tell the other cats stories of his million lives, his previous owners, and everything that he had experienced. And the other stray cats were very impressed with him, and they praised him and wanted to be in his company. All the other male cats wanted him to be their friend, and they brought him gifts of catnip and large fish bones. And all the female cats desired him and wanted to be his partner. But the tiger striped cat wasn't interested in the other stray cats any and being held in high status. You see, the tiger striped cat only loved himself, and he really didn't care for anything else. One day, the tiger striped cat took notice of an all white female cat. And unlike all the other stray cats, the white cat didn't flock to be in his company and hang on the end of his every word. In fact, the white cat didn't seem to be interested in the tiger striped cat at all. And for some reason, unbeknownst to him, this bothered the tiger striped cat, and he began to pursue the white female cat. The first time he approached her, the tiger striped cat tried to impress her with his stories. He said, "Did you know that I have lived 1,000,000 lives? I have had 1,000,000 owners and seen countless wonders in many lifetimes. And you haven't even finished living one." The all-white female cat turned her soft face towards the tiger-striped cat and simply said, "Is that so?" The next day, the tiger-striped cat strutted over to the white cat, and he said, "In one lifetime, I belonged to a sailor. I've sailed all over the wide world, seen the 7 seas, visited far-off exotic places. And all you have ever known of this world is this alleyway where you were born." Unimpressed, the gentle white cat looked up at him and said, "Is that so?" The following day, the tiger-striped cat saw the white cat drinking rainwater from the gutter. And as she lifted her head up, he did 3 backflips right in front of her. He then said, "I used to work in a circus, and I belong to a magician, and I..." The tiger-striped cat stopped in the middle of his story. He looked deeply into the white cat's eyes and simply said, "Can I be with you?" The white cat said, "I would like that." And so, from that day onward, the tiger-striped cat and the white cat were always together. They spent their time wandering the alleyways and hidden places of the city. They hunted together, played together, and shared stories and secrets about themselves. The tiger-striped cat was fascinated by the white cat and never wanted to leave her side. Eventually, as happens in these types of situations, the white cat became pregnant and soon gave birth to a litter of 9 beautiful white tiger-striped kittens. The tiger-striped cat and the white cat's days now became consumed with raising and protecting their young. The tiger-striped cat loved telling his children the stories of the many lives he had lived and the far-off places he had seen. And he taught his kittens many things that he had learned. And one by one, the kittens grew up. And when they were ready, each set off on their own to live out their own stray cat life. One day, when the youngest of the kittens had left home, the tiger-striped cat turned to the white cat and said, "All of our kittens have grown into wonderful stray cats and are now finding their place in the world. I'm so proud of all of them. Thank you for making them with me." And the white cat said to the striped tiger cat, "It is so." And for the first time in the tiger-striped cat's 1,000,000 lives, he realized that what he felt was happiness. And he loved the white cat and all their kittens more than he loved himself. And the tiger-striped cat wanted to stay with the white cat forever. And also, for the first time in his 1,000,000 lives, the tiger-striped cat became afraid to die. The tiger-striped cat and the white cat lived together for many more years. They grew old together. One day, the white cat got sick and she became frail, and her soft paws became softer and her voice more tired. The following day, when the tiger-striped cat awoke, The white cat did not move. The tiger-striped cat knew that she had died. And for the first time in his million lives, the tiger-striped cat began to cry. And he cried all that day. And when the sun went down, he continued to cry throughout the night. And when the sun came up the following day, the tiger-striped cat was still crying. The tiger-striped cat continued to cry through the following days and nights. His sorrow had been unleashed. Like a leak in a dam that eventually gave way, it flooded forth from him. He now understood the pain of all his owners who had cried for him, and this made him cry all the more. The tiger-striped cat cried 1,000,000 times, and then he laid down next to the still corpse of the white cat, and he too died. Only this was the last time. The tiger-striped cat was never reborn again. Okay, that is where our story ends. So again, I like to encourage people to think of the imagery, think of parts of the story that stand out to you, maybe how that connects with you in your personal life.
May I say something?
Yes, I heard this story. I think the first place that I entered the story was with the king, because, you know, part of what I was taught as being a man was that we weren't allowed to show our emotions openly. And to see this great, powerful, war-loving king like cry right there in the middle of the battlefield, that was, and even his sobs were huge and powerful. And that image struck me because I think for a long time I learned that I couldn't show that. To show that type of emotion was to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable was not safe. And so I always, that part, you know, I can connect with each part of each character in the story for different reasons. But definitely it's the last life for me when the tiger-striped cat has the freedom to choose what he wants to do. And then that ends up leading to the connection with the white cats and the family, and he kind of doesn't even know what he wants, but he finds it out in the process, and he's amazed by it. It's such a state of fulfillment that he didn't even know existed in life, and to me that's tremendously beautiful. And I know that feeling of not wanting life to end, and wanting the good stuff to stay, but it happens. And you know, and the crying 1,000,000 times, there's some type of atonement in that, that he understands for all the lives before, that speaks very deeply to me. But we have a little bit of time left, so if anybody else would like to share, I do want to touch on the death masks and stuff.
I'd just like to say, so I'll put my video on, that the cat chose
that explain grief or explain loss. And one of the reasons is, you know, it serves as a way of teaching, one generation teaching the next, of that, hey, these things are going to happen in life, and what do we do when they happen, and how do we feel, and how do we process through those things. And I think, you know, I always try to encourage my students to talk about that, and then I usually have them journal and stuff for a while after, and we do this death mask project. And that's where I think students kind of start to open up a little bit more, because it really kind of, the ritual at that point starts to become more personalized with them, as they're exploring parts of themselves that they need to let go of to try to grow into this next stage of their life. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And this is the slides I use. So, and I know we're coming up on the very end here, so we're not going to have time to necessarily do this in the workshop, but I would invite everyone to participate in this. This is a death mask. We talk about how different cultures have masks that they use in burial rites, what they are supposed to represent. Most of the time, they're like an effigy of the person who's passed. And what we do for this project is we kind of we're thinking like smaller deaths. We're not thinking the big end death here. We're thinking those smaller things that we have to grow through in life, much like the metaphor of like the butterfly and going into the cocoon, or the caterpillar going into the cocoon and emerging as a butterfly, that transformation. So I give them, we actually do really beautiful paper mache masks in class, but anybody could just do this at home. If you want to draw a circle, a face, a blank face on a piece of paper, and just play with the images that came up with you. And I always tell students to think of things that they're struggling with. Difficult experiences, loss of innocence is a big one for a lot of young people. Any character traits or habits that you feel hold you back, and arranging them on the face in different positions can also be very symbolic. The regions of the face also represent parts of our psyche, and so it becomes a kind of a private ritual for each person as they, I give them time in class, but then they're also working on it outside of class. And I have them break down their symbolism in the death mask. So they have to have like a color or an element of design that they use, and they tell me the symbolic significance of it, and then also the relationship to their true self, what this is saying about them. And so I found it to be a very powerful project for many of them. A lot of them who really give themselves to it have talked to me about it, and they get to keep the masks, and it's hopefully it's a lesson in learning how to let go of some of your grief, hopefully, or if it's able to do that for them. I did want to share some pictures of masks that my students have made. All right, so like just as we did when we first entered the story, it's also important to have a time at the end to kind of signify that return, crossing back over from this Kairos time, because we do have to come back. We have to come back to our regular lives, and be careful with the energies that we invite to work through us. It's important to have a significant cutoff from that. So there's definitely a time of releasing the stories, releasing the images, releasing the characters, letting them go back to, the collective unconscious, wherever they manifest from. So I urge people to just have a checkout, much like our check-in. If you want to write 2 to 3 final comments in the chat, anything that was meaningful to you or how you're feeling right now, what might be your takeaway? What's one thing that you might apply to an area of your life or your work or your purpose that you experienced in the workshop today? And it's helpful to end with the phrase, "I'm out." And I just want to say thank you to everybody for attending. I really appreciate your participation. I hope there was something that you got from this. If anybody would like to connect, my email is there. If there's any questions or comments, I'm also willing to share materials and stuff. I'm a teacher. I believe in sharing and spreading the message. And I also like to close with a quote from one of my friends, Chris Anderson, who's also a storyteller at this festival, that he always says at the end of our story circles that we do. He says, "The essence of what we have created here may have been similar to what our ancestors would have participated in long ago, a small representation of the village mind and heart." Thank you.
Thank you. That was really stunning. And to imagine this being done with high school students is so interesting and wonderful. I hope you're writing for educational journals, because a big contribution you can make is to bring other teachers along with this kind of work.
Right. Yes, and I am very interested in that, and I would love to pursue this more. I'm considering getting a master's in like folklore or psychology or storytelling. Just trying to find one that's within my means and the area that I live in has been kind of difficult. But I feel a calling to this, and it's one of my favorite things that I do with my students. It can be it's such a gift to hear them share their experiences and interpretations. I never take it for granted when I hear them speak about something like this.
University of Missouri has a folklore department. I don't know how far away they are from you.
Yeah, that's Columbia. That's about an hour and a half. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for the opportunity to be a part of the festival, and thank you everybody for being here. We're in the middle of